Chapter 31. Irina the Wolf Queen. Irina put her arms around Durell. Then, taking a leather jack of water from Adriel's saddle, she poured the blood away from the wolf's teeth and chest. The watery blood ran over her fingers and onto the ground, and Irina couldn't help crying. As she washed him clean, his fur smelt peppery and good. Somehow she had to get him and the other wolves away from the battle. "May I ride on your back?" she whispered. Durell lowered his huge body to the ground, and Irina climbed onto his back and plunged her hands into his thick, soft pelt, as she used to so long ago. How pure and clean life had seemed then, among the animals and trees and the river and the sky. Around her she saw the bodies of fallen men and horses and bloated wolves with chalky eyes. Some men were still fighting. The wind blew in hot gusts, and the sun's bruised yellow light shone pitilessly over the ugly battlefield. Irina felt the sickness in Durell's body and urged him in the direction of Ragnall Castle. The spell was indeed broken, but the wolves were confused and lost and ashamed. They seemed to know they had betrayed their own natures. The beasts dumbly followed Durell and Irina, not knowing what else to do. "Come, Adriel," Irina called, and the sleek white mare came and trotted beside Durell fearlessly. "What's happening?" asked Chloe. "I can't bear to look." "Irina is riding the biggest wolf," reported Mihaela from the window. "All the other wolves are following towards the city. Perhaps she's coming here." "Here? The wolves?" "Oh no," cried the Queen. "Don't fear, Your Majesty," said Octavia, who was packing a basket full of medicines and bandages to take to Irina. She had found Razel's bottle of healing potion. "The wolves are part of Irina's family. You are not in danger." As Irina rode, many of the exhausted soldiers joined her, some on horseback, most on foot. Some thanked Irina for her bravery. The wolves no longer frightened them. It was obvious that whatever magic had bound them was broken. Women and children looked through their windows at the curious sight of the girl on the back of a wolf as big as a pony, leading a procession of wolves and men. A little girl, watching from her doorway, said, "There goes Irina the Wolf Queen." As they neared the castle, people came out of their houses to cheer Irina and the soldiers. "What happened?" they asked. "Why have the wolves turned as meek as sheep? Where is Vilmos?" Before long, everyone knew the story of how Irina had knelt before the fiercest wolf and bared her neck, risking death. Finally, Irina halted in front of the castle. What a crowd she had brought, of wolves and soldiers and onlookers. She was glad to see Octavia. Mihaela and Jolene had appeared beside her, ready to help, along with the younger ones, Canenza, Damaris and Talita. The princesses moved among the soldiers, many of whom had collapsed on the steps, bringing them water. Octavia dabbed Razel's potion on the blood trickling from Irina's ear, and a scab instantly crusted over her skin. "I can't send those wolves back to the forests as they are," Irina said to Octavia. "They could harm other creatures. How do we help them?" Andor left Razel's hut, feeling troubled. He took some food out of the bundle Razel had given him, and was eating as he walked rapidly toward Ragnall. "I must keep my strength up," he thought, chewing on some kind of hard grain cake. "Just eat, get strong. How will I convince the people that I have not deposed King Nicholas?" Andor heard the sound of someone on horseback, moving quickly through the trees in the direction of Razel's hut. he glimpsed a cloak and a streak of pale skin covered in hair. From some distance further back came the sound of hoofbeats and of branches breaking and falling. "That's more than one horse," thought Andor. "This one's being chased." Andor saw the rider weaving between the trees. "Stop! Wait!" he called. The man's head jerked backward, and Andor glimpsed his face. Vilmos! The magician kicked his horse. Andor picked up a stone and threw it hard and fast into the back of the magician's skull. Vilmos fell to the ground, not far from the hut, while his horse, glad to be rid of its rider, galloped off into the forest. "Curse you!" screamed Vilmos, scrambling to his feet, one hand clamped to the back of his head, which was dripping with blood. The riders chasing Vilmos were fast approaching. Andor ran towards the magician, taking the child's sword from his belt. "Surrender now, Vilmos," he shouted. The magician drew his own sword. "You're going to fight me with that little baby sword," he sneered. His long, narrow blade was etched with the image of a dragon. "Good luck." The fight began just as King Harmon and his soldiers arrived. Vilmos would have stood a chance against Harmon or Nicholas, but Andor did not have their experience. For some minutes nothing could be heard but the clanging of blades. Vilmos backed away in the direction of Razel's hut. Andor started slashing harder and faster and succeeded, to his own amazement, in knocking the sword out of Vilmos's hand. By this time, the magician was leaning against Razel's door. Andor pressed the blade against his neck. "Surrender." "Never," he cried. "Surrender now or your life," said Andor, his heart beating hard in his chest at the thought of killing Vilmos. "I will not." King Harmon spoke. His deep voice resonated in the little clearing. "You are surrounded, Vilmos. You have no escape." The magician laughed and launched himself against the door of the hut. The door swung open, and Vilmos fell away from Andor's blade. "No!" shouted Andor. Scrambling to his feet, Vilmos took a knife from his boot and was about to grab Razel for a hostage when he saw King Nicholas. Using the wolfish strength still left in him, Vilmos lifted Nicholas and dragged him from the bed, muttering incantations as he did so. "Don't do this, Vilmos," said Razel. "You know where it will lead. I know where I want it to lead. You are no more than the dragon's pawn." "No one controls me," spat Vilmos. "You think you're doing this because of Chloe. The truth is your master and his master, the dragon, are using your feelings to do their work." Vilmos dragged Nicholas to the door. "The truth could help you," said Razel. "It's not too late." Vilmos pushed Razel away so violently that she fell. He hauled Nicholas through the door. Outside, Harmon blocked his path, Andor beside him. "You missed your chance, weakling. It takes daring to kill," said Vilmos to Andor, who bowed his head in shame. "You haven't got what it takes to be king." Harmon was appalled at the sight of Nicholas, barely conscious, in Vilmos's grip. Seeing the poultice bandaged to his neck, the pale and feverish skin, the eyes half closed and rolling back in his head, Harmon knew his friend was close to death. Inside the hut, Razel forced herself to her feet and walked unsteadily to the doorway. "Lay the king's body down," said Harmon. "Give me a horse," demanded Vilmos, raising his knife to Nicholas's throat. Nicholas gave a few wheezing breaths and tried to open his eyes. Harmon asked one of the soldiers to dismount. "Release the king, Vilmos. You may have this horse." "Keep everyone away from me," said the magician as he dropped Nicholas on the grass. He hurried towards the horse. "No one is to touch me. I want your word, Harmon," he said, mounting the horse. I do not give my word to fiends. Now go. Vilmos kicked his heels into the horse's sides and set off into the trees. He'd almost disappeared from view when there came a whizzing sound, and Vilmos gave an almighty shriek. The little group saw him fling out his arms and crash down through the branches to the ground. After the shout was silence. Andor, Harmon and the soldiers turned to see the red-bearded Radburn lowering his bow. I saw the snake ring on his finger, said Radburn, and he didn't tell us not to, Your Majesty. I couldn't let him go. He turned me against King Nicholas. He turned me into a traitor. No one spoke. Razel, looking white but otherwise recovered from her fall, knelt by Nicholas. The quiet of the forest was disturbed by a curious scuffling sound. It grew louder and louder. The long grasses appeared to shift and bulge with moving shapes. "What's that?" said a soldier. He jumped when a rat ran over his foot. Suddenly there were dozens of rats, then hundreds, large and small, brown, black, white and grey. They scampered through the grasses towards the fallen figure of Vilmos. They clustered around him and appeared to be pushing him. Vilmos's body was turned over, the arrow sticking out from his side. Vilmos's head flopped to one side, his mouth open. Many of the rats disappeared under his body. They formed a living, moving, bustling stretcher, and they carried him off. No one made any attempt to follow. No one knew where the rats were taking Vilmos, except the rats themselves. "Shouldn't we stop them?" asked Andor. "Let the rats carry their master to his grave," said Harmon wearily. "It's time to go home."